You are ruining our ride, Mom. I froze in the back seat. Ruining it, my son. That was the only thing I could answer. Yes, Mom, we wanted to spend a quiet day, just the four of us, he said, gripping the steering wheel with desperation. If you kept a little quieter, everything would be more bearable, murmured my daughter-in-law without turning to look at me. Now speaking to my own son is annoying, I asked, feeling my face heat up, and at that moment something was about to happen, something no mother should ever live through, something that would break me inside. I am Emily Roberts, and I was excited about the family trip we had not had in months. My son Michael Roberts had promised we would visit the Botanic Garden that Sunday, and I spent the whole week getting ready. I packed my bag with care, picked out the nicest clothes I had, and even bought some special sandwiches to take along. Those moments with family were the only ones that still brought me true joy in my house, where I have lived alone since I became a widow. When Michael arrived with Linda, his wife, and my two grandkids, Sebastian, who is 12, and Sarah, who is 8, I was ready at the door smiling like a little girl, but soon I realized something was off. Linda greeted me coldly without even looking at me properly, and the grandkids seemed impatient, glued to their phones. Michael was tense, constantly checking the watch on his wrist. During the ride in the car, I tried to chat. I asked about the kids' school, about Linda's work, but I received only curt answers and looks of irritation through the rearview mirror. I felt like I was bothering them, but I did not understand why. When we stopped at the first red light, I suggested we could stop at a diner to grab a quick coffee before going to the garden. "Mom, you do not stop talking," Michael told me with a harsh voice he had never used with me before. "You are ruining our ride. We just wanted to have a moment in peace." His words hit me like lightning, leaving me speechless with surprise. Linda laughed softly and said something about some people not knowing when to shut up. I shrank into the back seat, feeling my face burn with shame. The grandkids remained glued to their phones as if nothing had happened. What happened next was something I never imagined a son of mine would be capable of doing. When the light turned green, Michael did not drive forward. Instead, he pulled over to the curb, turned off the engine, and turned toward me with a cold expression I had never seen before. "You know what, Mom? You really are ruining our family trip. We wanted to have a quiet day, just the four of us." My heart started to race, sensing that something terrible was going to happen. "Michael, what are you saying?" I asked with a trembling voice. He opened the car door and practically pushed me out, throwing my bag out after me. "Call an Uber or walk, Mom. You always find a way." I stood on the curb in total shock, watching my own family's car drive away. But what they did not know was that I had resources they never imagined. The humiliation I felt standing there on that sidewalk was something I will never forget. People passed by looking at me with curiosity, an old lady abandoned on the street by her own family. Some even stopped to ask me if I was okay, if I needed help. The shame I felt was overwhelming. How to explain that my own son, the one I carried in my arms, whom I raised with so much love and sacrifice, had thrown me out of the car as if I were an unwanted object? I took out my phone with trembling hands and called a taxi. During the 20-minute ride home, tears rolled silently down my face. The driver, a gentleman named Ralph, noticed my state and asked if I wanted to talk. I just shook my head, unable to form words. When I arrived at my house in the suburbs, I sat in my living room and tried to understand what had happened. At what moment had I become a burden to my son? When had I stopped being the beloved mom to become the nuisance that ruined family trips? I sat there looking at photos of when Michael was a boy, when he hugged me and told me I was the best mom in the world. The same hands that used to seek my comfort had now pushed me out of his life. The same mouths that used to ask me for stories now said that I was in the way. I got up and went to the kitchen to make myself some chamomile tea to calm my nerves. While I waited for the water to boil, my mind started to remember all the small slights I had been ignoring for months. The times Michael canceled our Sunday lunches at the last minute. The occasions when Linda answered me with one-word answers when I tried to chat. The grandkids' birthdays where I felt like an intruder instead of the beloved grandmother. The family parties where everyone chatted excitedly until I arrived, and then an uncomfortable silence fell. I had been justifying everything, telling myself it was normal that families change, that maybe I was exaggerating my feeling of rejection. But there, standing in my kitchen, drinking my tea, while the tears kept falling, I realized I had not been exaggerating anything. My own son saw me as a nuisance, and he had the nerve to tell me in the cruelest way possible. During that long and painful night, I started to remember all the sacrifices I had made for Michael over the years. When my husband Edward died in a work accident when Michael was barely 15 years old, I was left alone to raise him. I worked double shifts at the grocery store to pay for his studies. I sold the jewelry my husband had given me to buy his school uniforms. I stayed up all night taking care of him when he got sick. I went to all his school meetings. I applauded at every graduation. When he married Linda, I helped with the wedding expenses because they did not have enough money. When they bought their house, I put up half the down payment so they could get the bank loan. During all those years, I never asked for anything in return other than a little bit of love and respect. But apparently, even that was too much to ask. I got up from the kitchen table and went to my bedroom. I opened the drawer of my nightstand where I kept important documents. There were all the papers that Michael knew nothing about, the proof that I was the co-signer of his mortgage loan. When Michael and Linda bought their house 3 years after getting married, he still did not have enough work history for the bank to approve the loan on his own. Since I had helped with the down payment, the bank required me to become a co-signer, assuming legal responsibility for the payment in case they could not comply. Michael paid the monthly installments on time, but legally, I was still responsible for the contract. It was a detail that not even Linda knew, a secret I had kept so as not to hurt my son's pride. Now that same detail would become the key to my liberation. I also took out other documents from the same drawer that Michael did not know about. The will where he appeared as the sole beneficiary of my assets. The life insurance policies where he was the beneficiary. The account statements of my investments in the bank, which added up to a considerable amount after years of work and saving. Documents of the house where I lived, which was in my name, not his, as he believed. During all these years, Michael had lived thinking that we were a humble family, that I depended on him for everything. He never imagined that I had my own resources, that I had been careful with my money, that I had my own financial independence, that I had chosen not to show so as not to make him feel bad. But that night, while organizing those papers on my table, I realized that the moment had come to show him exactly who I was. The next day, Monday, I woke up with a mental clarity I had not felt for years. The pain was still there, deep and constant, but along with it, a determination had emerged that I did not know. I cried no more. I lamented no more. Instead, I started to make practical and deliberate decisions. First, I called my lawyer, Robert Miller, a serious and competent man who had handled my legal affairs for years. I made an appointment for that same afternoon. I want to review my will, I told him, and make some important changes. He asked no questions, just confirmed the time. Afterward, I went to the bank where I had my accounts and asked for a complete statement of all my investments. I wanted to have a clear view of my financial situation before taking the next steps. During that week, Michael did not call even once to see how I was to apologize or even to explain what had happened. That silence confirmed what I already suspected. For him, the incident had been just a moment of justified irritation, not something he needed to apologize for. Linda also showed no type of shame or worry. It was as if I really were just a nuisance that had been temporarily removed from their lives. The grandkids, who before at least greeted me when we met at the supermarket, now seemed to have been instructed to avoid me completely. I realized that my expulsion from the car had not been a momentary impulse from Michael. It had been a decision he had already been considering a cruel but effective way to show me my place in the family hierarchy. It was then that I made the decision that would change everything forever. During the early hours of Thursday morning, while suffering from insomnia, I got up and went to my small desk where I kept important documents. I opened the drawer I had not touched in months and took out a yellowish folder. Inside was something Michael was completely unaware of. The proof that I was the co-signer of the financing for the house where he lived with his family. When Michael bought the house 2 years after the marriage, he still did not have enough job seniority for the bank to approve the credit alone. Since I had helped with the down payment, the bank demanded that I become a co-signer, assuming legal responsibility for the payment in case he could not meet the monthly payments. Michael paid the monthly installments on time, but legally I remained responsible for the contract. It was a detail that not even Linda knew a secret I had kept, so as not to interfere with my son's pride. But now that same detail would become the tool of my recovered dignity. As a co-signer, I had the legal right to request a review of the contract if I considered there was a risk to my assets. And after what Michael had done demonstrating emotional instability and aggressive behavior toward the one supporting him financially definitely constituted a risk. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank's number. It was 1 a.m, but I knew the call centers worked 24 hours. When I was connected with an executive, I explained my situation with a firm and clear voice. I want to request the immediate review of the mortgage loan where I serve as a co-signer due to erratic behavior of the main holder that puts at risk my capacity to meet financial obligations if necessary. The executive explained the procedure to me and confirmed an appointment for the next day. Michael would have 15 business days to present a new co-signer or prove sufficient individual income to maintain the loan. Since he had changed jobs recently and his salary was not yet consolidated, I knew it would be practically impossible for him to meet that demand in such a short time. After hanging up the phone, I sat in the darkness of my living room, feeling for the first time in months a strange but comforting sensation. It was power. The power to make decisions about my own life. The power not to be treated like a burden. The power to show real consequences to the one who had disrespected me in the cruelest way imaginable. It was not revenge I felt. It was justice. During all those years, I had chosen to be silent, understanding, sacrificial. I had allowed Michael to take my sacrifices for granted, to assume that I would always be there to support him, no matter how he treated me. But that morning, sitting in my favorite armchair, I made the most important decision of my 72 years. I was not going to allow anyone ever again, not even my own son, to treat me as if I had no value. And when Michael discovered the consequences of his actions, he would realize that he had completely underestimated the woman I had become. During the following days, my mind did not stop replaying every moment of the humiliation I had lived. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's cold face when he pushed me out of the car. I heard Linda's cruel little laugh. I felt, again, the shame of standing on that sidewalk like a beggar. But what hurt me the most was not just that terrible moment, but realizing that it had been the result of months, perhaps years, of silent contempt that I had been ignoring. I got up very early on Tuesday, as was my custom since I became a widow. I brewed my coffee on the stove, just as my mom had taught me so many years ago. While waiting for it to boil, my gaze landed on the photograph on the shelf. Michael, at 5 years old, hugging me on Mother's Day in kindergarten, his little arms surrounding my neck, his huge smile showing the little teeth he had lost. "I love you more than the stars, Mommy," he had told me that day. At what moment had that tender boy become the cold man who had abandoned me on the street? I took my cup of coffee and sat in my favorite chair by the window. From there, I could see the small garden that Edward and I had planted when we first got married. The rose bushes he planted for me continued to bloom every spring, even though he was no longer there to take care of them. I sat there remembering how my life had been before everything became so complicated. Edward was a good man, hard-working, who drove a city bus route. We did not have much money, but we were happy. Michael was our only son, our little miracle after 3 lost pregnancies. We took care of him as if he were made of glass, but we also taught him values, respect, love for the family. When Edward died in that horrible accident, Michael was 15 and in high school. I remember how he cried that day, clutching my skirt like when he was little. "What are we going to do now, Mom?" he had asked me with eyes full of tears. "Move forward together, my love, always together." I had replied, not knowing that those words would become a promise that only I would keep. The years after Edward's death were the hardest of my life, but also the ones that made me feel the proudest. I got up from my chair and went to the closet in my bedroom. In the back, kept in a shoebox, I had all the photos from those years. Michael at his middle school graduation, smiling with his diploma, while I cried with happiness in the front row. Michael on his first day of high school, nervous but excited. Michael at his high school graduation, now taller than me, hugging me tight while whispering, "Thanks for everything, Mom." In every photo I was there. In every important moment, there I was. Working double shifts to pay for uniforms, tuition, books, staying up late to help him with homework. He didn't understand taking him to the doctor when he got sick, even if I had to miss work and lose the day's pay. I closed the box and went back to my chair, but this time tears started to roll down my cheeks. They were not tears of self-pity, but of deep sadness, realizing how everything had changed. I remembered when Michael met Linda in college. He was in his second semester of business administration. She was studying accounting. The first time he introduced her to me, I tried to be the perfect mother-in-law. I welcomed her with affection. I made roast beef because he had told me it was her favorite food. I showed her photos of Michael when he was a boy. But from the beginning, I noticed something in her gaze, a coldness she tried to hide with forced smiles. When they got married 2 years later, I helped with everything I could. I sold my engagement ring, the last tangible memory I had left of Edward, to help them with the wedding expenses. I gave them the living room furniture that Edward and I had bought with so much effort for our first home. But after the wedding, things started to change gradually. At first, they were small details that I justified. Michael no longer came to have lunch on Sundays, as we had done for years. When he came, he stayed a short time and seemed anxious to leave. Linda always had an excuse not to accompany him. A headache worked to take home commitments with her family. When the grandkids were born, I thought things would improve. That being a grandmother again would give me an important role in the family. And at first, yes, it was like that. I took care of Sebastian while Michael and Linda worked. I gave him his bottle. I sang him the same songs I had sung to Michael. When Sarah was born 2 years later, I was thrilled to have a little granddaughter. I held her for hours, rocked her to sleep, bought her cute little clothes with my savings. But as the children grew, my role in their lives began to diminish. Linda hired a girl to take care of them in the afternoons. They no longer needed me to pick them up from school. On weekends, instead of coming to my house like before they went to Linda's parents' house or stayed home watching movies as a family, when I asked if I could join them, there was always a reason why it was not possible. The place was too small. They had already made a reservation for 4 people. The kids wanted to be alone with their parents. Gradually, my presence became optional, then annoying, finally unwanted. And I, in my blind mother's love, kept justifying everything, telling myself it was normal that families evolved, that maybe I was being too demanding. On Wednesday afternoon, while sweeping the backyard, my neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, approached the fence that separated our houses. "Hey, Emily, is everything okay? On Sunday, I saw you very upset when you got out of the taxi." I stood there with the broom in my hands, not knowing what to say. Mrs. Wilson was a good woman, but she was also the person who knew the most about everyone in the neighborhood. If I told her what had happened, the whole block would find out in less than a week. "It was just a misunderstanding, Mrs. Wilson. You know how young people are nowadays, always in a rush." She looked at me with that face women make when they know something important is being hidden from them. "Look, Emily, I don't meddle in anyone's life, but if you need to talk to someone, I'm here. Sometimes it's good to vent with a friend." I thanked her and continued sweeping, but her words stuck with me. When was the last time someone had offered me their friendship without expecting anything in return? That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling and remembering all the signs I had ignored over the last few years. The times Michael hung up the phone on me saying he was busy when I just wanted to hear his voice. My birthdays where he arrived running gave me a gift that obviously Linda had bought and left after half an hour. The occasions when I arrived at their house unannounced and noticed how the whole family tensed up, as if my presence altered the harmony of the home. The grandkids who hugged me with less enthusiasm each time, who preferred to play in their room than chat with me in the living room. I had been living in denial, clinging to a love that was no longer returned, insisting on maintaining a relationship that only existed in my imagination. On Thursday, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I visited Edward's grave at the cemetery. I brought fresh flowers, white daisies, which were his favorites, and sat on the small bench next to his tombstone. "Edward," I said in a low voice. I think I failed as a mother. Our son became someone I don't recognize, someone capable of humiliating me like I never thought possible. The wind moved the leaves of the trees, and for a moment I seemed to hear his voice telling me I hadn't failed, that I had done everything I could with the love I had. But then, what did I do wrong? Why does Michael treat me as if I were a burden? At what moment did I stop being his beloved mom to become the nuisance that ruins his family plans? While I was sitting there talking to my dead husband, I began to understand something I had been denying myself. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had loved too much. I had sacrificed too much. I had given too much without asking for anything in return. And in that process, I had taught Michael that my love was unconditional, that no matter how he treated me, I would always be there. I had created a monster of selfishness without realizing it, a son who took for granted everything he received and who considered he had the right to treat me poorly because he knew I would forgive him. "Edward," I whispered, touching the cold stone, "I think it's time for Michael to learn that actions have consequences, that a mother's love is not infinite when it is not respected." I returned home that afternoon with a new mental clarity. I no longer felt just sad or confused. I felt angry, a just clean anger that I had never felt before. All my life, I had been the understanding woman, the one who turned the other cheek, the one who justified others' mistakes to keep the peace. But that night, while heating my solitary dinner on the stove, I realized that the peace I had been preserving was false. It was the peace of resignation, of conformity, of accepting crumbs of affection when I deserved a banquet of respect. Michael had grown up believing he could treat me however he wanted because I would never set limits, never have consequences, never say enough, well, he was wrong. On Friday morning early, my phone rang. It was Michael. For a second, my mother's heart jumped with hope, thinking maybe he had reflected that he was going to apologize. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound neutral. "Mom, I need you to do me an urgent favor. Linda got sick and can't take care of the kids today. Can you come stay with them?" His voice sounded normal, as if nothing had happened the previous Sunday, as if humiliating me in public was such a small thing that he had already forgotten it. "Michael," I said with a very calm voice, "don't you have something to say to me?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "About what, Mom? I'm in a huge rush. The kids are eating breakfast and I have a meeting early." I could not believe what I was hearing. He didn't even remember what he had done. To him, it had been so insignificant, he didn't even recall it. "Michael, on Sunday you pushed me out of the car and yelled at me to call an Uber." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh yeah. Well, Mom, we were all stressed. You were talking a lot and the kids were restless. Don't make a big deal out of it." Don't make a big deal out of it. My own son was asking me to ignore the biggest humiliation of my life as if it were a meaningless stumble. I am not going to take care of your children today, Michael. Not today and never again. The silence on the other end was total. What, Mom, are you mad about Sunday? I already told you it wasn't serious. Besides, the kids miss you. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The kids had already gotten used to living without me just like their dad. Michael, until you apologize sincerely for what you did, I am not going to do anything for you. And I hung up. Immediately after hanging up, Michael dialed again, and then again, and again. I let the phone ring until he got tired. Around 2 in the afternoon, he arrived at my house. He knocked on the door insistently, but I didn't open. Mom, I know you're there. Open the door, he yelled from the sidewalk. I have to work and I have no one to leave the kids with. I stayed sitting in my living room listening to him yell, feeling a strange mix of pain and satisfaction. It was the first time in his life that Michael was experiencing a real consequence of his actions. The first time his lack of respect toward me caused him a real problem. After half an hour of yelling and pleading, he left, but I knew he would come back. And sure enough, he came back that night accompanied by Linda. This time, they knocked more politely. When I opened the door, Linda had a forced smile and Michael looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Roberts, Linda said with a sugary voice, I think there was a misunderstanding on Sunday. Michael told me what happened and we thought maybe we could talk to clear things up. I looked her in the eyes, those same eyes that had shone with amusement when Michael humiliated me. Oh, really? And what was the misunderstanding? Michael stepped forward. Mom, maybe I was a little abrupt on Sunday, but you were also being very insistent. We can forget about all this and go back to normal. Go back to normal. To the normal where I was the convenient grandmother who appeared when they needed her and disappeared when she was in the way. Michael. I told him with a calmness that surprised me. Your normal was treating me like an unpaid maid. My new normal is going to be very different. Linda intervened quickly. Mrs. Roberts, the kids love you very much. Sebastian has been asking for you. Another lie. Sebastian had spent months without speaking a word to me, other than to greet me formally. Linda, I have been observing for years how I am treated in this family. I have noticed the looks of annoyance, the sighs when I arrive, the rush to end visits. I pretended not to notice because I thought it was better to keep the peace, but I am not going to pretend anymore. The two looked at each other uncomfortably. Mom, said Michael with a pleading voice, we are family. Families argue and reconcile. You can't be mad forever. Michael, I responded. A true apology would have arrived on Sunday night. An explanation would have arrived on Monday morning. A show of regret would have arrived during the week. What arrived today was panic because you need something from me. That is not regret. That is convenience. Linda lost her patience. Look, lady, I don't know what you want us to do. Michael already told you that maybe he was too abrupt. What more do you expect? I looked at her steadily. I expect respect, something you two don't know how to give. And I closed the door in their faces. I heard them arguing on the sidewalk for several minutes before leaving. That night, I slept better than all week. At last, I had told the truth. At last, I had set boundaries. And although my heart ached, I also felt a strange freedom, as if I had taken a huge weight off my shoulders. The next day, Saturday, while watering my plants in the garden, I realized the moment had come to make definitive decisions. I couldn't keep living in this emotional limbo, waiting for Michael to change, waiting for him to understand the damage he had done to me. It was time to assume control of my own life, to stop being the victim of circumstances and become the author of my destiny. I went into the house and took out the documents I had been reviewing during the week again. It was time to use the power Michael was completely unaware of. It was time to teach him that actions have consequences, that unrequited love runs out, that a mother's patience has limits when it is not valued. and when he discovered what I was about to do, he would realize that he had completely underestimated the woman who had raised him. Monday morning, I woke up before dawn, as if my body knew this day would mark the beginning of something completely new. It wasn't nervousness I felt, but a cold and calculated determination I had never experienced. I got up, bathed carefully, and dressed in my best navy blue dress, the same one I had worn to Michael's college graduation. I wanted to look respectable, serious, like the 72-year-old woman who had taken the reins of her own life. I quietly drank my coffee with sweet bread, watching through the window as the sun began to light up my garden. Every movement I made was deliberate. Every decision was perfectly planned. It was time to execute the plan I had been forming in my mind all week. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called the bank. The executive who assisted me, Mr. Fernando Morales, had known me for years because I had always been very punctual with all my payments and very responsible with my accounts. "Good morning, Mrs. Roberts. How can I help you?" His voice was kind and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Morales. I need to request the immediate review of the mortgage loan where I serve as a co-signer. It is my son Michael Roberts' loan." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Is there a problem with the payments, ma'am?" I adjusted myself in my chair. I took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything forever. "The problem is not the payments, Mr. Morales. The problem is that the main holder has demonstrated emotional instability and aggressive behavior toward me, putting my peace of mind and my ability to honor the commitment if necessary at risk." Mr. Morales explained the whole procedure patiently. As a co-signer, I had the perfect right to request a review of the loan if I considered there were risk factors to my assets. Michael would have 15 business days to get a new co-signer with proven credit capacity, or demonstrate that his individual income was sufficient to maintain the loan without additional backing. "Mrs. Roberts," Mr. Morales told me, "you understand that this could result in the cancellation of the loan if the holder cannot meet the new requirements, right?" I understood it perfectly. In fact, it was exactly what I expected to happen. Michael had changed jobs just 4 months ago. His new salary was good, but he didn't have the job seniority necessary to qualify for a loan of that amount on his own. And getting a new co-signer in 15 days would be practically impossible, especially because he would have to explain why his own mother had withdrawn her backing. After hanging up the phone, I dialed my lawyer's number, Robert Miller. We had worked together for years on various legal matters, from buying my house to managing pensions after Edward's death. He was a discreet, intelligent man who understood the importance of personal dignity. "Robert," I said when he answered, "I need to see you today to make important changes to my will." His voice became serious immediately. "Is everything okay, Emily?" I explained the situation briefly without going into emotional details, just the facts. My son had disrespected me in a grave and unforgivable manner, and I had decided it was time to protect my assets and my dignity. "I understand perfectly, Emily. What time can you come to my office?" At 2 in the afternoon, I was sitting in Attorney Miller's office in his elegant office downtown. Spread out on his desk were all the documents of my current will. "Emily," he said, reviewing the papers, "currently your son Michael is the sole beneficiary of all your assets. What changes do you want to make exactly?" I had thought a lot about this over the last few days. "I want to create a trust for my grandchildren's college education, Sebastian and Sarah. They will receive the money when they turn 18, but only for educational expenses. The rest of my assets, including this house and my investments, I want to designate to the St. Mary's Shelter, that institution that cares for elderly ladies abandoned by their families." The lawyer looked at me over his glasses. "Are you completely sure of this decision? It is a very radical change." I explained my reasoning with total clarity. Michael had shown that he did not value what I had done for him all his life. He had reached the point of humiliating me publicly without showing the slightest remorse. If that was how he treated the mother who had raised him with so much sacrifice, he did not deserve to benefit from my death. Instead, my grandkids still had the possibility of becoming better people than their father, and my money could ensure they had a college education without depending on anyone. And the ladies at the shelter, those who had been abandoned by their own families just as I was being abandoned, could live with dignity thanks to my contribution. Also, I told the lawyer, I want Michael not to find out about these changes until after my death. It is important that he doesn't know what he lost until it is too late to change his behavior out of interest. Attorney Miller worked for 2 hours preparing all the documents. Meanwhile, I sat in his office feeling a strange sensation of liberation. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions based on what I deserved, not on what others expected of me. For 72 years, I had lived sacrificing my desires for the well-being of others. First my parents, then Edward, then Michael. I had always put everyone's needs before mine. But that day, sitting in that elegant office signing documents that protected my dignity and my assets, I felt like the independent and strong woman I should have always been. When we finished, the lawyer handed me a copy of all the documents. "Emily," he said with respect, "I hope you never have to use these papers for many years, but I am glad to see a lady of your age having the courage to defend her dignity." That same afternoon, when I returned home, I found 3 messages on my answering machine. All 3 were from Michael, and each one sounded more desperate than the last. In the first one, his voice was controlled but tense. "Mom, the bank called me. They say you requested a review of the loan. I don't understand what is happening. Call me, please." In the second message, he already sounded frankly worried. "Mom, please answer the phone. I need to know what is happening with the bank. Why did you ask for a review of the co-signer? Linda is very nervous." In the third message, his voice was almost pleading. "Mom, please, we need to talk urgently. The bank gave me 15 days to get a new co-signer or prove individual income. You know that is impossible in such a short time. Please call me." I listened to the 3 complete messages without feeling a shred of pity. For years, Michael had ignored my calls when it suited him. He had cut our conversations short when he got bored. He had postponed our dates when he had more interesting plans. Now that he needed me urgently, he expected me to run to solve his problems as I had always done. But those days had ended forever. Instead of returning his calls, I went to the kitchen and made myself a quiet dinner: vegetable soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and chamomile tea. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, enjoying the silence of my house. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that oppression in my chest that had accompanied me since last Sunday's incident. I felt free, powerful owner of my own destiny. The next day, Tuesday, Michael arrived at my house very early. I was eating breakfast when I heard his car park outside. I looked out the window and saw him get out quickly with a face of extreme worry. When he knocked on the door, I continued eating breakfast calmly. "Mom, please open. We have to talk." His knocks became more insistent. "I know you're there. Your car is in the driveway." I got up, slowly smoothed my dress, and went to open the door. Michael had dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept well. His clothes were wrinkled, and he had that desperate expression men get when they realize they have lost control of a situation. "Mom, thank God, we need to talk urgently about the bank thing." He looked genuinely distressed, but I no longer felt the automatic compulsion to console him as I had all his life. "Good morning, Michael," I said with a calm voice. "What can I do for you?" My formal tone visibly disconcerted him. "Mom, why did you ask for the review of the loan? The bank is asking me for a new co-signer in 15 days. "You know that is impossible." I looked him in the eyes, those same eyes that had looked at me with contempt while pushing me out of the car. "Michael, when someone demonstrates a lack of respect toward the person who is backing them financially, that person has the right to protect their interests." He stayed silent for a few seconds, processing my words. "Is this about last Sunday, Mom? I already explained that we were stressed it wasn't that big a deal." There he was, again minimizing my pain, trying to make me believe my reaction was exaggerated. "Michael," I told him with a patience that surprised me, Do you think humiliating your mother in public is something minor?" His face turned red. "I didn't humiliate you, I just asked you to calm down." I couldn't believe he continued denying reality. "Michael, you pushed me out of the car and yelled at me to call an Uber. What do you call that?" He ran his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated. "Okay, maybe I was a little abrupt, but is that why you're going to ruin my life? Is that why you're going to make me lose my house?" His question showed me exactly what I already knew. To him, the problem was not having hurt his mother, but the consequences that was bringing to him. There wasn't a shred of genuine regret, just panic over the repercussions of his acts. "Michael Wessey," I said with a firm voice, "for 72 years I have put your well-being before mine. I have sacrificed my desires, my needs, my dreams to make sure you had everything you needed. And last Sunday you showed me that all that love and sacrifice means nothing to you. You treated me as if I were a disposable nuisance." His eyes filled with tears, but I had already learned to distinguish between tears of regret and tears of self-pity. "Mom, please, you can't do this to me. Where are we going to live if we lose the house? What is going to happen to the kids?" It was typical of him to use the grandkids as emotional blackmail when he needed something from me. "Michael, you and Linda are responsible adults. You will find a way to solve your problems just as I had to do when I was left a widow with a teenage son." The conversation continued for almost an hour. Michael alternated between desperate pleas attempts at emotional manipulation and moments of anger where he let his true character show. At no moment did he offer a sincere apology. At no moment did he acknowledge the emotional damage he had caused me. All his focus was on the financial consequences he was facing, not on repairing our relationship. When he finally realized that I was not going to change my mind, his mask of a worried son fell completely. "Fine, Mom. If that's how you want things, that's how they'll be. But don't come looking for forgiveness later when you realize what you did." He left slamming the door just like he did when he was a teenager and didn't get his way. The difference was that now I would no longer run after him to fix things. That same afternoon, the phone rang. It was Linda with a sweet and calculated voice. "Mrs. Roberts, how are you? I hope you are well." Her fake tone gave me nausea. "I am very well, Linda. What can I do for you?" There was a pause, as if she were following a prepared script. "Well, I wanted to tell you that the kids have been missing you a lot. Sebastian asked me yesterday when Grandma was coming to visit us." It was a lie, and we both knew it. Sebastian had spent months without showing real interest in seeing me. "Linda, if you have something to say to me, tell me directly. Don't use the kids." Her voice became a little colder. "Okay, Mrs. Roberts. Michael told me what is happening with the bank. I think maybe there was a misunderstanding and we could solve it like civilized adults." I explained to Linda with all the patience in the world that there was no misunderstanding. I told her exactly what had happened on Sunday, how Michael had humiliated me, and how neither he nor she had shown the slightest interest in apologizing until they needed something from me. "Mrs. Roberts," she told me with a voice increasingly desperate, "I understand that you are upset, but ruining our lives isn't going to solve anything." It was incredible how everyone in that family had the same mentality. When the consequences of their acts reached them, suddenly I was the one being unreasonable. "Linda," I finally said, "you ruined your own life the day you decided you could disrespect me without consequences. I am only protecting my dignity." During the rest of the week, Michael and Linda alternated between pleading calls, unannounced visits, and attempts to use other relatives as intermediaries. Linda's sister called me to mediate the situation. Michael's cousin, Anthony, stopped by my house to try to convince me to be understanding. Even Mrs. Wilson, my neighbor, mentioned to me that Linda had asked her if I was mentally healthy. All these attempts at manipulation only confirmed what I already knew. Michael and Linda did not understand that the real problem was their lack of respect toward me. They believed that with enough social pressure, they could force me to return to the role of submissive grandmother I had always played. But I was no longer that woman. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after implementing my plan, I received a call from Mr. Morales at the bank. "Mrs. Roberts, I am calling to inform you that Mr. Michael Roberts has requested an extension of the deadline to present the new co-signer. Would you be willing to consider this extension?" The question was pure formality. As the original co-signer, I had the absolute right to approve or deny any modification to the terms. "Mr. Morales," I replied without hesitating, "I am not willing to grant any extension." Mr. Roberts had 15 days to resolve his situation, which is more than enough time for a responsible person. There was a pause on the other end. "I understand, Mrs. Roberts. In that case, we will proceed with the cancellation of the loan next week." That same night, while eating quietly in my kitchen, I looked out the window and saw Michael standing on the other side of the street looking at my house. He had his hands in his pockets and a defeated expression. For a moment, my mother's heart felt a pang of sadness. That was my son, the baby I had carried, the boy I had comforted, when he had nightmares, the young man I had supported in every dream. But immediately, I remembered his face of contempt when he pushed me out of the car, his cruel words, his total refusal to acknowledge the damage he had done to me. This Michael standing on the street was not the loving son remembering good times. He was a desperate man who had finally understood that his actions had real consequences, and that understanding had come too late. Monday morning, exactly 15 days after having started my plan, I received the call I had been waiting for. It was Mr. Morales from the bank. "Good morning, Mrs. Roberts. I am calling to inform you that we have proceeded with the cancellation of Mr. Michael Roberts' mortgage loan. He has 30 days to settle the outstanding balance, or the bank will proceed with the foreclosure of the property." His voice was professional but understanding. He knew these family situations were always complicated. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Morales. Thank you for keeping me informed." I hung up the phone and sat in my favorite chair, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. After 72 years of putting others' needs before mine, I had finally learned to value my own dignity. I didn't have to wait long for the reaction. Exactly 2 hours later, Michael arrived at my house, accompanied by Linda. This time they didn't knock on the door violently or yell from the sidewalk. They knocked gently, like polite visitors, and when I opened the door, both had expressions of total defeat. Michael had red eyes as if he had been crying, and Linda looked pale and haggard. "Mom," Michael said with a broken voice, "can we come in? We need to talk to you." I let them in, and we sat in the living room. The same living room where years ago we had celebrated his birthdays, his graduations, his achievements. Now the atmosphere was completely different. Heavy, tense, full of unsaid words and lost opportunities. "Mom," Michael began, and for the first time in weeks his voice sounded genuinely regretful. "The bank notified us that they canceled the loan. We have a month to get the full money or we are going to lose the house." Linda looked at him with desperation as if urging him to say something more. "I know I messed up last Sunday. I know I treated you very badly and that you didn't deserve it." Finally, after 2 weeks of denial and manipulation, he was starting to acknowledge reality. But I had learned to distinguish between genuine regret and panic over consequences. "Michael," I said calmly, "are you sorry because you understood the damage you caused me? Or are you sorry because now you are facing the consequences of your acts?" He stayed silent for a long moment, and in that silence I could see the internal struggle on his face. Part of him wanted to give the answer I wanted to hear, but another part, the honest part, knew I deserved the truth. "At first," he admitted finally, "I was angry because I didn't understand why you were doing all this over something that seemed minor to me. But these days I have had time to think, and I think I'm starting to understand what you must have felt. It was a start, but it was still not enough. Michael, for 2 weeks you have been asking me to solve your financial problem, but you haven't asked for forgiveness for the emotional damage you caused me. Doesn't that seem strange to you?" Linda intervened for the first time. Mrs. Roberts, Michael is very sorry. We are both very sorry, but now we need to find a solution before it is too late. There it was again, the mentality that had characterized this family for years. First the practical needs, then the feelings. First resolve the immediate problem, then deal with the emotional damage. Linda, I told her, looking her directly in the eyes, are you also sorry? Because I remember clearly that you laughed when Michael pushed me out of the car. Her face turned red and she lowered her gaze. I didn't laugh at you, Mrs. Roberts. Maybe I smiled out of nerves, but it was never my intention to hurt you. It was a lie, and we all knew it, but at least she was trying to acknowledge she had done something wrong. Linda, for 5 years, I have tried to be a loving mother-in-law to you. I have respected your space. I have taken care of your children. I have supported your decisions. At any moment, do you ask yourself why I never managed to earn your genuine affection? The question caught her off guard. She stayed silent for several minutes, clearly trying to decide if she should be honest or diplomatic. Mrs. Roberts, she said finally, I think I always felt that you wanted to be very important in our lives, and I wanted Michael and me to have our own space as a family. It was the most honest conversation we had had in 5 years of knowing each other. Linda, did you ever consider that I didn't want to be important in your lives on a whim, but because you are my only family? When Edward died and Michael got married, you became my entire world, but for you, I was just one more person in your lives. Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time I saw her as a young and scared woman, not as the cold daughter-in-law I had known all these years. Michael took Linda's hand and then looked at me. Mom, I think we have been very selfish without realizing it. We always took for granted that you would be there when we needed you, but we never asked ourselves what you needed from us. Finally, he was starting to understand, but it had arrived very late. Michael, last Sunday, you didn't just push me out of the car, you pushed me out of your life. You showed me that you saw me as a nuisance, as something disposable. Do you know what that does to the heart of a mother who sacrificed everything for you? He broke completely. Tears ran down his cheeks while he looked at me with an expression of genuine pain. Mom, forgive me, please forgive me. I don't know at what moment I became someone capable of hurting the person who has loved me the most in life. It was the moment I had been waiting for 2 weeks. Real regret, genuine recognition of the damage caused. But strangely, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Instead, I felt a deep sadness for everything we had lost, for all the opportunities of love wasted. Michael, I told him softly, I appreciate that you finally understand what happened, but the damage is already done. For years, you have treated me as a convenience, useful when you needed a babysitter, uncomfortable when you wanted privacy. Sunday was just the culmination of a pattern that has been going on for a long time. Linda leaned forward. Mrs. Roberts, what can we do to fix this? We are willing to do whatever is necessary. I looked at both of them. These 2 young adults who had finally understood that actions have consequences. Linda, Michael. I told them with a firm but not cruel voice, there are things in life that cannot be fixed. There are damages that cannot be repaired. What you can do is learn from this and ensure you never treat another person how you treated me. Michael got desperate. Mom, please, it can't be that there is no way to solve this. We are family. Mistakes are forgiven in families. It was incredible how he kept thinking that the word family was a magic card that could erase any damage. Michael family is not just a title. It is love, respect, mutual consideration, and that is built day by day with actions. It is not maintained automatically by blood relations. Linda tried once more. Mrs. Roberts, the kids are going to suffer if we lose the house. Sebastian and Sarah are not to blame for our mistakes. It was the last resort, using the grandkids as emotional blackmail. Linda, I replied. The kids are going to learn a valuable lesson from this experience. They are going to learn that actions have consequences, that respect is earned and maintained, and that hurting the people who love you has a real price. Michael got more desperate. So, what are you going to let us lose the house? Are you going to leave us with nothing? His question revealed to me that he still didn't completely understand the situation. Michael, I am not going to leave you with nothing. You are going to be left without something because of your own decisions. There is a very important difference. I explained that they had 30 days to get the money and settle the loan. With 2 professional salaries and some financial creativity, they could find a solution. Maybe not in the same big house, maybe not with the same standard of living, but they could move forward. The difference, I told them, is that now you are going to have to make an effort and sacrifice to get what you want, just as I made an effort and sacrificed for years to give you what you needed. You are going to learn the real value of things when you have to work hard to obtain them, Linda asked timidly. And our relationship, can we hope that one day you will forgive us? The question was genuine, and I could see in her eyes that she was really worried about something more than the financial consequences. Linda, forgiveness is something that is earned with consistent actions over time, not with words said in a moment of crisis. If you really have learned something from this experience, you will have to demonstrate it for months, maybe years. Michael asked me what kind of actions could demonstrate real change. I explained that they would have to learn to treat me like a person with feelings and needs, not like a convenience. They would have to include me in their lives, because they really wanted my company, not because they needed something from me. They would have to teach the grandkids to value and respect their grandparents. And above all, they would have to understand that respect is not negotiable. No matter what problems they were facing, they could never again take it out on me in a cruel way. But all that, I clarified, will have to happen without the pressure of this financial crisis. You will have to solve it by yourselves to demonstrate that you can be responsible adults. When they left that afternoon, both seemed different people from the ones who had arrived. They had lost that attitude of entitlement, that automatic expectation that I would solve their problems without questioning. Linda hugged me before leaving, and for the first time in 5 years, the hug felt genuine. "Mrs. Roberts," she whispered, "I think I admire you for having the courage to teach us this lesson, even though it hurt us so much." Michael also hugged me, and I could feel he was trembling. "Mom," he told me with a broken voice, "I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the son you deserve, even though maybe it is already too late." I told them it was never too late to change, but that the change had to be real deep and permanent. During the following weeks, I observed from a distance how Michael and Linda fought to solve their financial crisis. I found out through Mrs. Wilson that they had put the house up for sale to try to get part of the money. Also that Michael had asked for loans from several relatives and that Linda had started working overtime. The grandkids had been enrolled in cheaper public schools. It was painful to see my family go through difficulties, but it was also necessary. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing the real consequences of their decisions. They were learning that they couldn't take people for granted without paying a price. 3 weeks after the bank's ultimatum, Michael called me on the phone. His voice sounded tired but more mature than before. "Mom, I wanted to tell you that we found a solution. We sold the house and got a small loan to buy a more modest apartment. The kids are going to have to change schools, but we are going to be fine." He didn't ask me for help. He didn't make me feel guilty. He simply informed me as a son would inform his mother about important changes in his life. "I am very glad to hear that, Michael. I am proud that you found the way to solve your problems by yourselves." There was a long pause. "Mom, do you think one day we can go back to being a family?" His question broke my heart, but I knew I had to be honest. "Michael," I told him with tenderness but firmness, "we never stopped being family, but the way we relate is going to be different from now on. I am no longer going to be automatically available to solve your problems, and you are going to have to prove to me with actions that you really value me. I explained that I was willing to rebuild our relationship, but that it would have to be on terms of mutual respect, not on the terms of convenience that had prevailed before. Does that mean you are no longer going to be our grandmother available 24 hours? He asked with a sad smile in his voice. It means, I replied, that I am going to be a grandmother who participates in your lives because I am welcome and valued, not because I am necessary and convenient. That conversation marked the beginning of a new stage in our relationship. Michael and Linda started to visit me regularly, but with a completely different attitude. They no longer arrived expecting me to solve their problems or watch the kids while they did other things. They arrived to spend time with me, to talk, to include me in their lives genuinely. The grandkids, who had been witnesses to the whole crisis, also changed their attitude toward me. Sebastian wrote me a handwritten letter, apologizing for having behaved disrespectfully, and Sarah started calling me on the phone just to tell me about her day at the new school. The most notable change was in Linda. Without the pressure of maintaining a big house and an expensive lifestyle, she seemed more relaxed and genuine. One afternoon, while we were drinking coffee in my kitchen, she told me something that surprised me. Mrs. Roberts, I think this crisis was the best thing that could have happened to us. It forced us to grow as people and as a family. I asked her what she meant by that. We always lived thinking that the good things in life were automatic, that you would always be there to support us, that we could take without giving anything in return. Now we know that important relationships require work, respect, and constant consideration. It was a wisdom that had arrived through pain, but it was real wisdom. Months later, when they had already settled into their new, more modest but more authentic life, Michael asked me a question he had been avoiding. Mom, did you hate me when you did all this? Did you want to hurt me as much as I hurt you? The question made me reflect deeply on my motivations during those difficult days. Michael, I told him honestly, I never hated you. I was deeply hurt, disappointed, and angry, but I never stopped loving you. What I wanted was to teach you that actions have consequences, that respect is not optional, and that love without respect becomes destructive. I explained that my goal had never been to punish him for revenge, but to educate him so he would become a better man, better husband, and better father. And did you achieve it? He asked me with genuine curiosity. I looked him in the eyes, those same eyes that had looked at me with contempt while pushing me out of the car, but that now reflected humility and real respect. I think so, I told him with a smile. I think you finally understood that being family means mutual responsibility, not just unilateral benefits. That afternoon, as I watched them leave after a pleasant and respectful visit, I realized that I had achieved something I never thought possible. I had saved my relationship with my son by teaching him to lose me. I had recovered my dignity by showing him the consequences of trampling on it. And I had found peace, choosing my own value over his comfort. It was a painful but necessary lesson, and we both had come out of it as better people. 6 months have passed since that terrible Sunday that changed our lives forever, and I can say with absolute certainty that they were the 6 most peaceful and authentic months I have lived in years. My routine is now simple, but deeply satisfying. I wake up when my body asks me to, without rushing, without the anxiety of being available for others' emergencies. I drink my coffee in the kitchen while I watch the sunrise light up my small but blooming garden. The plants Edward and I planted so many years ago keep growing beautiful, as if reminding me that good things endure when cared for with love and patience. My days are full of activities I had forgotten I liked. I read more books in these 6 months than in the last 5 years. I rediscovered my passion for sewing and finished the quilt I had left abandoned when I became too busy being the grandmother on duty. I went back to cooking complicated dishes for the simple pleasure of cooking, not out of family obligation. And above all, I learned to enjoy my own company without feeling that constant need to be useful to someone else. It was as if I had recovered parts of myself that I had gradually lost without realizing it. Sundays became my favorite days. Before they were days of anxiety waiting for calls that sometimes arrived and sometimes didn't, preparing for visits that could be canceled at the last minute. Now they are days of absolute peace. I go to Mass at St. Mary's Church, where the ladies of the prayer group received me with open arms. Mrs. Carmen Jenkins, a woman of my age who had also gone through family problems, became a true friend. With her, I discovered that it is possible to have deep and meaningful conversations without being interrupted by grandkids demanding attention or daughters-in-law watching the clock with impatience. Michael and Linda have kept their promise of change. They come to visit me every 2 weeks, always with a prior appointment, always asking if it is convenient for me, always bringing something small but thought out with affection. Fresh flowers, sweet bread from my favorite bakery, a book they thought I would like. The conversations are different now. Michael genuinely asks me how I am, what I have been doing, what I think about different topics. Linda participates naturally without that forced tension that characterized our previous interactions. The grandkids have learned to see me as a real person, with interesting stories to tell, not just as the grandmother who gave money and free care. The most surprising thing for me has been discovering that I enjoy these spaced out and respectful visits more than the constant invasions of privacy that characterized our previous relationship. When someone comes to see you because they really want to spend time with you, not because they need you for something, the quality of the connection is completely different. Sebastian told me last week that he had written an essay on family respect for school inspired by Grandma's Crisis. Sarah drew me a portrait where I appear smiling in my garden with a note that says, "My brave grandma." These small gestures mean more to me than years of services taken for granted. One afternoon while I was watering the plants in my backyard, Michael arrived alone. It was something unusual because they always came as a family for scheduled visits. "Mom," he told me with certain shyness, "can I talk to you?" We sat under the oak tree that Edward had planted to give me shade, and Michael stayed silent for several minutes. "What's wrong, my son?" I asked him with tenderness. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I realized something I never told you." I prepared myself to listen without pressure, giving him the space he needed to express himself. I realized that for years, I thought being a good son meant coming to visit you and fulfilling basic obligations, but I never asked myself if you were happy, if you felt valued, if you had your own dreams you wanted to fulfill. His words touched me deeply because they showed a level of introspection I hadn't seen in him before. "Michael," I told him, "that is something many adult children don't understand until it is very late. The fact that you are understanding it now at 35 years old gives me a lot of hope." He stayed thoughtful for a moment. "Can you forgive me for all the years I treated you as if you were part of the furniture of our lives?" The question was so sincere, so vulnerable, that I felt my mother's heart soften completely. "Michael," I told him, taking his hand, "I forgave you months ago. What I was waiting for was for you to forgive yourself and use that experience to grow as a person." I explained that forgiveness does not erase the consequences of the past, but it does allow building a different future. What is important now is not lamenting lost time, but valuing the time we have ahead. We sat in silence for a while, enjoying the fresh afternoon breeze and the sound of the birds in the trees. It was a comfortable silence full of mutual understanding and new possibilities. That same night, while preparing my solitary but not lonely dinner, I reflected on how my perspective on family life had changed. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant always being available, always understanding, always willing to sacrifice my needs for those of my family. But now I understand that that mentality had created a toxic dynamic where my value as a person was linked solely to my utility for others. By learning to say no, by establishing clear boundaries, by demanding basic respect, I hadn't just saved my dignity, I had taught my family to really value what they had. The beautiful irony of this whole experience is that by moving away temporarily from my family, I had managed to get them to approach me in a more authentic way. By refusing to be taken for granted, I had forced everyone to reflect on the real value of my presence in their lives. Michael mentioned to me a few weeks ago that Linda had told him, "Now I understand why your mom did what she did. We treated her like an employee, not like family." That recognition hadn't come through sermons or reproaches, but through the direct experience of losing something valuable by not taking care of it properly. Today, while I write these reflections in my personal journal, I can say that I found something I had lost a long time ago: my own identity, independent of my role as mother and grandmother. I am Emily Roberts, a 72-year-old woman who loves reading, who enjoys cooking, who has interesting opinions about life, who can be pleasant company when treated with respect. I am not just Michael's mom or Sebastian and Sarah's grandmother. I am a complete person with self-worth. And that understanding has transformed not only how my family sees me, but how I see myself. The most valuable lesson I learned from this painful experience is that true love includes healthy boundaries. Loving someone does not mean allowing them to disrespect you. Being family does not mean emotional abuse is acceptable, and maintaining family peace is not worth it if that peace is built on the foundation of your own trampled dignity. Sometimes relationships need to break temporarily to be able to rebuild on more solid and respectful foundations. As I close this chapter of my life and embrace the tranquility I have found, I realize that the greatest victory was not getting Michael and Linda to change their behavior. The greatest victory was discovering that I had the power and strength to demand the respect I deserved. It was learning that it is never too late to value oneself, to establish healthy boundaries, to choose dignity over family comfort. Sometimes the greatest beginning is the silence one decides to maintain until they give back the voice that deserves to be heard with respect. We are curious to know how far this story went. Where are you watching from? Comment below.